Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Lighting the Candle, A World That Works. And so I'm Bill Carell, and I have with me today two of our original cast, if you will, Lisa Sheehan and also Ken Caputo. And as you can see on the screen, his real name is, well, actually, this is his superhero name, Ken's iPhone. So what are we doing? We're talking, and what are we talking about? Well, we're actually speaking a world into existence, one that works, one where all of us can listen to each other for empowerment, and all of us can hear in our own speaking the kind of place that we want to wake up every single day, the world that we can't wait to get out of bed every single morning and just go and maximize every minute of it. And one of the things that we like to say around here, and it's been said by many, is, every single day is possible. It's the best day ever. And can you even imagine, what it would be like if we all operated from there? How much more would we be able to listen to people that we pretty much can't stand listening to? And how much more would we be curious about, why are they the way that they are? And how much more would we really want to get to know the person that we've been married to or in a relationship many, many years? It's like, you and I are not the same people we were even last Friday. The world events and the things that we've heard about. And, just to kind of kick things off today, I found out that my best friend and his wife had COVID now for the second time in less than 9 months. So the bad news is that no, getting COVID one time doesn't mean you're never going to get it again. The good news is hopefully this particular strain is a lot less virulent. It's very communicable, but it doesn't seem to be. It's almost like this virus has decided that no, it's not a good idea to do the host in. So from there, with all of that, the change that we've had last week, you and I won't be the same people when I finish this sentence. Every single moment of every single day, we are completely updating with what we now know, what we used to remember and think about, and what we're thinking about right in this moment. So I'm interested in arguments for and against. I mean, are we really kind of like that proverbial river that you can never stick your foot in 2 times?
It would have to be. Life just keeps flowing and you're going with it. So
Yeah, and the neat part of it is that it's always now and now and now and now. And this whole notion of temporality in terms of the past and the future, there are explanations for something that we really can't prove. And I know that there are some schools of thought that believe, all times are happening at the same time. Now, I don't know much more about it than that, and I think that's pretty thought-provoking. So, in that way of thinking, for particularly Ken, uh, when you can choose to experience anything that's going on in the present any way you choose, and there are myriad thousands of different ways to experience every single moment. We've talked about that in other podcasts. But the point being is, if the world is acting on you and you're acting on it, and we're all part of this big system, I mean, how important is it to be able to conduct yourself through time by what you remember and have memorized?
I think that's how you learn to conduct yourself, because you bring everything from your past with you, but everything's so individualized that nobody can know what you bring with you except for you. And I don't even know if that's true, because you don't remember everything that happens to you either. So it's what's basically the most recent beliefs you have that have been reinforced are what you're basing your current moment in about.
Yeah, and I think, Lisa, Would you say it's true that some people try to develop formulas for how to act in the present based on what seemed to work for them at another time?
I think that's what they believe your ego kind of tries to do by seeing the present moment and comparing it to the past and how it relates to your current situation. It's kind of like human nature to use what you know and run the old reels and see if it's different or if it's good, bad, or indifferent, and to react in that. Hopefully, respond and not react, but respond or react in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like there was a training that I took back in the 1990s where they talked about human beings are just a big jukebox.
Mm-hmm.
They also called, skin bag. You're a skin bag with that just keep collecting all of these experiences and never get a way to get rid of the ones that are not working for you. But it's almost like in any conversation when somebody is speaking, um, B7 gets pressed, and now here comes that tape, and
Please, Mister, please don't play B-17.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So while you're running that tape, there are a lot of people, if you knock them off of their speech, they have to go back to the beginning and start it over again. And I think at some point in life, I've found that it's probably easier just to start from where you are right now, and oftentimes it's just a question, right? Like
And
for
you're good at that. I think, you're one of the best examples of being in that moment of curiosity and asking people from that point of view, and not running it through your old reels and seeing how it relates specifically to you, which is what people are doing all the time. Like, what does it what's in it for me, or how does that affect me? That kind of thing.
Yeah, that FM station, WII-FM,
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
in it for me? Well, I want to acknowledge that high praise because I would probably have been described to you 25 or 30 years ago as the guy that doesn't listen, the guy
Well,
that
you've come a
knows.
long way.
And hopefully I've made some progress in that area, and thank you for pointing that out. But I really am genuinely interested in what comes next, and this, it extends to my family and people that I haven't met, and then especially to people that I've known for such a long time. And I value, the opportunity to create a lifetime relationship in less than 30 seconds, just by simply showing up and inviting the authentic people that are there in the conversation to come out and play. And I love it. It gives me goosebumps when I'm in the presence of people who would probably rather do this conversation than almost anything else.
And I think that's a good way for us to point out, like you said at the beginning, this now moment. How we react or live in it can be different if you take a different direction, like you do. Like, why did you say that, or tell me more about that? Is a classically good question.
Sure. Yeah, and unfortunately, human beings are not real masterful with having unknown things. When more than a certain number of things are not quantifiable or thingifiable, we really have to relate to objects as much as we can, where we can, use that economics theory, which basically says holding other things equal. All these things, nothing is ever held equal. It's all changing and dynamic all the time, but we have to think that way. Other things equal, this will happen. And that's our prediction. And when we live that way, um, thinking in terms of what we believe we know about the circumstances before actually even doing the inquiry and getting inside of what the circumstance actually is right now. What are we talking about? What is this conversation for? And is this a valuable way to spend our time? And if
Yeah,
those
and the
kinds
other part is, I think that people have a hard time when if you suddenly don't agree with them. I know I sometimes get caught up in that. If I state something that this is brilliant fact, and then somebody points out a different direction or point of view of that fact. And I went, oh gosh, all right. You just destroyed one of my little things, but let me think about it.
That's that whole quantifiable. It's got a particular weight. It tastes a particular way. It's predictable. It's going to be there. It's going to be that for you. It's going to reinforce your value of believing in that thing as an object. And then we objectify everything. We objectify cats. We objectify plants. We objectify people. We objectify groups. Any way you can slice and dice it, these characteristics are over here and those characteristics are over there, and really the neat thing is,
yeah, we've talked about that. Yeah,
we do that so we can stay sane, but it's not really a very enjoyable way to live your life. There's not a lot of satisfaction with being right about what somebody's going to say and do before they do it. Yeah.
No, I know, but I think that's what the way people would like the world to be most of the time. It's like, especially if it's your friends and family that you just assume will agree with you, and then they don't when they don't. But then that's where you come up with like you said that, like you do, is like, so tell me more about that, or why do you feel that way, or
like Spock used to say, fascinating.
Yeah. And then beat up.
I like picking up little isms from here and there. Inigo Montoya. Oh, you used that word again. I do not believe that means what you believe it means.
Inconceivable.
Absolutely. And he said it with such conviction, and every single Mandy Patinkin had my heart at the end of that movie, 100%. So I really want to hear more from Ken, and hopefully you'll be able to engage us in a minute or two. And at the same time, I think it's kind of cool navigating, this particular setup where just seeing Ken's superhero avatar there, Ken's iPhone, I am empowered to continue this conversation with you, Lisa. And I think if Ken really had anything to say and he could hear us properly, he would be chimed in by now. So.
No, actually, I've been listening in the whole time and just enjoying the things you guys have been talking about.
Yeah, it's called nonsensical riffing, I think.
Well, I think it's, what I find interesting is, I guess the question is, what does it mean to you to be the pioneer of your own life, the navigator of your own life? And I think that's where there can be a lot of disconnect, because we all have different answers to that question. And all of the things that have led to the moment that we're experiencing right now have been acquisition of skill and experiences that help you in some way, or hinder you in some way, of continuing the process of navigating your life. So it's like someone said in business, and I always appreciated this. This is, so often you're basically building the bike while you're riding it. And that's how we're living our life, So I guess, like, for me personally, my commitment is to live my life as best I can with grace and balance, and, with kindness and all those kinds of things. So there's certain values that, my experiences have taught me, and I utilize those things, but I also don't want to be held in place by them either. So yeah, it's a curious thing.
Very much so. I have no idea who that was, but they'll get over it. Y'all are more important to me right now than some 888 number. That's probably somebody I need to talk to.
Yeah, you're.
They can wait. I'm choosing
your vehicle warranty.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Either that, or we're in the extension period of Medicare Part B selection, or some silly stuff like that. Well, Ken, I really like that analogy. Back when I was working in larger corporations, and when other people had time off, we were always working because I was in charge of MRP systems and software and hardware, and when we do upgrades, it just never seemed like we were done with the design and the engineering. We're either training people to get ready to start doing the upgrade, or we're in the middle of the upgrade, or we just finished the upgrade and now we're trying to fix all the stuff that we didn't do right while we were doing the upgrade. And I use the analogy of changing an engine on a 747 while you're flying it, and that's the way I would talk about it back in the 1980s and early 1990s. But I really like the mind picture of being the designer, or the author, or being the discoverer, or the word that you used that I can't remember now because I was so listening to what you said that I didn't retain it. And I kind of like being in that space where when I speak and people ask me to say again what I just said, I respond sometimes with like, don't listen to me while I'm talking. You're just getting what's inside of me that wants to come out right now. And that's upsetting for some people. They want me to take responsibility for every word that I utter. And I don't know. What I believe that's inconceivable is if I say something that didn't work just then and I notice that it didn't work, I can say it differently and newly, right?
All the time.
We get to do that, right? Isn't that the way people communicate with each other in a functional society? And
maybe.
Yeah, I know. We'll have to do some investigation there, won't we? Yeah, I mean,
so often, interrupting each other too. So it's bound to happen that you lost your thought too.
Well, I have a pretty interesting take on that, interrupting people. There's interruptions to make a point and to be right, and to stop somebody from finishing a sentence. Those are interruptions, that way. And then there are interruptions which are like the Beatles backing each other up, with riffs. And
I believe those are the most common or almost practical conversation tools, because we do it to each other. It's harder to do on Zoom because of the quality of the audio, but otherwise I think that's what classically people that know each other well enough can do to each other.
Yeah.
But I know people that are very bothered by being interrupted.
100%. Because their thought isn't complete until the punctuation at the end of the sentence. And I think what's really kind of interesting with regard to that is, there he is.
There's two of them.
Yep.
Hopefully one of me should go away.
So the whole idea of people having a conversation and just being so excited that they can hardly contain themselves and have to interrupt, holy crap, that's the kind of conversation I want to be in all the time,
It's like ping pong. It's a more fun way to be.
100%. And then it's like ping pong, and then the food analogy is like the popcorn's going off and all these new ideas, and can hardly express yourself. Maybe the words aren't even there, from time to time. It's more like, Gunther Tootie, ooh, There are a lot of people out there that will not get that reference, but Gunther Tootie was one of the the characters in Car 54 back in the late 50s, early 60s. And Muldoon, remember?
That wasn't one of mine.
You didn't watch Car 54?
No.
You're too young. Oh no, I'm sure, right?
I remember it, but I mean, I know of it, but I didn't watch it.
Car 54, where are you? So yeah, no, I don't think we've ever had this conversation before. And so if you go into your day really kind of looking forward to whatever happens, as opposed to the plans that come to mind while you're looking at your calendar and the events that you have scheduled and who you're going to have conversations with. Um, you can get a call from somebody with an 888 number right in the middle of a podcast recording, right? And the main thing with all of the anticipation of, give me what's coming, is almost like a mastery level, like a sports analogy, right? So when Michael Jordan, or let's just take somebody who's a little bit more current than that, whenever somebody gets into a set of circumstances that is upsetting to them in terms of what their fundamental training is, what their core skills are, and something goes awry with that, and then they solve it on the court. It's like that situation where the home team goes down by 17 points. They have a brief conversation, and they talk about, the next thing we're going to do is this. Let's execute that. And so that starts the ball rolling. And before you know it, there's like this sense of accomplishment, and everyone is falling into where they need to be to gain not only those 17 points back, but to keep the other team from scoring any while they're doing so. Watch the Yukon Huskies do this many, many times, because they used to be very good about being down by 17 or 18 points midway through the first half, right? So the notion of podcasting is a lot like that. We don't script this. Most podcasters do not script what they're going to be talking about. They may have notes, and they may have some points that they want to pull out. And this podcast in particular, if I were going to compare this to a sitcom, I think it would probably be a little bit like Jerry Seinfeld. We're not trying to propagate any particular point of view, except for, you have a great life. You have an opportunity every single moment to take an experience that may not be so great and transform it into the life that you say you want. I'm letting that settle in for a moment. A lot of people, that's going to sound like nonsense and gibberish. But the point is, everything that you are speaking for or against is what you're putting your attention to. And I've always believed that what you argue for, you get to keep. Changing direction and gear in a conversation allows that conversation to take on a different life. And you give life to worlds in the words that you speak out of your mouth. That's something that we've talked about before. The responsibility and the fun, if that were true, and if it's something that you wanted to embrace and play with for a little while, that would be great research to hear back from people. I would say, let's set up a scenario. At some point in the next 24 hours, you're likely going to be in a conversation with somebody where they're going to say something that you absolutely do not like, do not believe it's true, and you'll have a preconceived kind of a formula way of addressing that, which may have worked a couple of times in the past, but if you think about it, maybe it hasn't worked all that well at all for most of the occurrences. And then what if you can be that strong headwise to hear before you do that thing and change whatever that is into a brand new question that you never thought of before in this type of circumstance? What would a momentary curiosity pause look like? And what possibility and what sort of things could that possibly open up that wouldn't be possible if you just reacted to the comment in the kind of the way that you think you heard it and you internalized it? Now, some of
You could
y'all
also do, yeah. No, you could also, Well, because I thought you were just like playing with us by saying, let's have a moment to think about it. We were giving you that anyhow.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, and that's a classic, not classic, but probably a new way to look at it too, is to give a moment of silence, because people can't stand it. They have to fill it up for the most part. So something golden can come out of their mouth because they don't know what to say next. And that could open up a conversation too. I mean, we've had, where silence is a member of the group. So I kind of enjoy silence, but it's not a comfortable aspect in most conversations. But if you try it and see what comes out of the person's mouth, because they might fumble or divulge something that they never would have before in that moment.
I guess an underlying question is, how do people respond to discomfort?
Right.
This is different for each of us. Like it's something we play with kids right now, because boredom makes them very uncomfortable, because they have access to pretty much constant stimulation. So, so if you have a kid who's, you're creating an environment where they have to rest in the discomfort of being bored for a little bit of time, they may act out. You don't know how they're going to react. And I guess each of us as humans, we have some kind of a relationship with that. So someone says something that you don't agree with and it makes you uncomfortable. What do you do? Do you run away from that? Do you try to convince them not to think that way? Do you try to understand them? So how much of the disconnect that occurs is each of us in our own way trying to figure out what to do with the things that make us uncomfortable.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not a bad idea to pre-invent a line that you're going to interject that should really help the circumstances. And I'll tell you one thing that you can say, um, and it might not necessarily be true, but when somebody says something that sounds to you like a horrible complaint, if you got a beard, you can grab it and pull it and whatever. But you can just say, I understand. And while you're saying, I understand, you actually are. You're taking a moment to take on board whatever the thought was. And I've heard people say, react to my saying, I understand. And they would say, well, what do you understand?
Mm.
I understand that you've got feelings right now that are difficult for you to express. And I know that because I'm looking at your face while I'm hearing what you say. And what's coming out of your mouth is not a conversation that I want to continue in that loudness and tenor. And I'm saying to you right now, I understand that this is a really, really crucial point for the two of us to be careful with the words that come out. Or not be careful at all, but make an agreement that we're not going to walk away from each other angry. That before we leave, we may not agree with each other, but we will not go away with that being the last thing that we said. So that's kind of a made up scenario right there. But I understand it takes care of a whole lot of business all in 2 words. And the fact that you're taking that momentary pause to let it sink in, maybe all of those things that I just verbally stated are thoughts. Maybe they don't come out of your mouth at all. Maybe the next thing that you say out after that is the summary of what all that feeling is and what all of that understanding is, and then ask a question. That question could be a list. It can be, what do you want most right now? What's the main thing for you at this moment? How can I be a support to you? I think my experience with people who are expressing anger, mostly they're not used to getting that kind of question. I think mostly what they hear is, what's wrong with you? Or what's the matter? Or will you stop being such a horse's butt? I feel like January 18th, 2022, are on the precipice of having so many people in a disagreeable mood for so many different things, that if we just learn how to give each other a little bit more space and not take personally what anybody says at all, and be curious about how does this build a road for us to go down together, in the future. And Ken, I know you're a master at being able to be inside of testing conversations and still kind of either be tapping your shoulder or whatever it is that you do to keep you mindful and present so that you can ask a better question. And I've seen you do it many times.
Yeah, that's just been a product, I think, of learning to rest in my own discomfort and not, like it's like you ever have a loved one who's in pain, whether it's emotional or physical or whatever, and that makes you in pain, but you can't fix their pain to alleviate your pain. You have to be able to rest in your own pain in order to properly support them in theirs, in their process, but that's very hard for people. So we try to fix it. We try to make their pain go away the way we'd make our pain go away, which may or may not work, you know. So when so it's just an interesting thing. And I think as an athlete you learn this because your training is uncomfortable. It's not fun. It hurts a lot of times. It's, you're causing all kinds of stressors on your body and your mind. But if you've committed to the outcome you want from the training session, you've got to learn how to live in that discomfort because that's just where you are, and wouldn't it be nice if you could just take a pill and get the same result without the discomfort, but you can't. So, you know, so it's just funny as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking about that a lot is just our relationship. I think Tony Robbins said it once. We're either moving away from pain or towards pleasure, on an instinctive level. So, but if we're unaware of that instinct on a conscious level, now we're going to be in a state of reaction. And, so if you look at what's polarization, their belief system makes me uncomfortable. I want to go over here. I'm going to move away from that pain and towards the pleasure of all these people who think like I do. And now it's an us against them,
Mhm.
you know? So, but I feel better until they intrude on me again because they broke into my bubble and now I don't feel good. So I'm going to run even farther away and find some more fanatical people that really, really think like I do and attack anyone who doesn't. And I feel better again. And,
Or maybe running to people who look like they're having more fun in the world, and at least they're not getting beat up as much, right?
yeah, sure. However you choose to process it. But in the end, I mean, the reality of it is, I remember someone saying to me, I was coaching them on, like doing a coaching thing, and they're like, I don't want to have to exercise for the rest of my life to be healthy. And I'm like, well, that's going to be a problem. I mean, you, you're just, if you stop exercising, that will have an impact, and probably a lot of it will be negative. So, but I don't but they're like, but exercise isn't fun. I don't enjoy it. It's uncomfortable. Okay. Let's try to find exercise that you can somewhat enjoy but there's always going to be this discomfort. So now it's really just what's your relationship with it?
Yeah. Yeah, some people think that being well is better than being a little bit uncomfortable exercising.
No, but
Yeah,
see,
and I mean,
towards it too, because if you see results, then I think, even in exercise. But I was watching um, Forks Over Knives documentary on eating more plant-based, whole food plant-based, and how uncomfortable people are at the beginning because I don't know how to eat plants or how to cook them, or but then they get all the advice and start doing it, and all of a sudden they're off all their meds and they've lost weight and they look better, feel better. And so I think with anything, if you see the results, not that that makes you stick with it, but I think or know that results will happen. and then
Yeah.
celebrate those small results, like we've talked about
Yeah.
before, honoring that.
Well, it can be challenging. Those results usually take time and they're
Yeah.
subtle. And, it's like exercise. I mean, more and more exercise, they're saying it can help, mitigate the risk of Alzheimer's and, but exercising when you're 35 for something that may or may not happen,
Yeah. Yeah.
35 years down the road, that can be a tough sell.
Yeah.
So, so it's really just now you're just doing almost like risk assessment. Well, when you're 70, what do you want, how do you want your life to look? And and then so now it's back to what level of discomfort are you willing to learn to embrace in the journey that is the home being the moment of your life right now, and the journey being the fact that that's a process that's happening whether you want it to or not. So, but it's not all like there's no, I don't know. It's funny. I think for some people, I know for me, I used to think in business like I was going to get it all right, and then it was just going to coast. And I remember the day when I realized this process is never going to stop. There is no right. There's just right enough for right now, and it's never going to stop ever, ever, ever until I stop. You know, like, and then it's going to go on in some other form without me. It's going to be indifferent to that. It'll change, but so it's kind of interesting if you're, oh, I'm working to retire, or I'm working to be healthy, or I'm working, to have the perfect relationship. That view is going to, create some challenges for you.
So it's very interesting, and I always like these people who, the question of, if you were going to go back and give advice to yourself when you were 20, what would that advice be? And for me, I would definitely tell that smartass, you might want to be a little bit more quiet, and you might want to listen more, and you might want to understand better before you start going 90 miles an hour. You'll be okay. It works out. Trust me. You'll be okay. Do you remember what it was like to be 20 years old?
Yep.
Well, say some more about that, please, because I don't.
Oh, it's kind of vivid for me because I was a angry dude. I was miserable. I was unhappy. I was unfulfilled. I was a mess. I did not like the person that was looking back at me in the mirror. So that's actually why I found martial arts, and that was what began the process. And again, the I guess that's the other interesting thing about it is if you the only way out is through becoming more skillful, and becoming more skillful means you have to position yourself to attract the right teachers, you know, over time, and then just decide what's real for you and what's truth for you in that moment, and then do some daily work. So but yeah, I remember, because it was a 5-year process of becoming a more positive person, and it was a very difficult, very committed, but I just decided I didn't want to be a jerk, and I didn't want to have a short temper, and those kinds of things. So but it didn't happen overnight, like Lisa was saying. It's like switching your diet or whatever. The results happen slowly over time. So, but yeah.
What kept you going even back then?
um it was a couple things. It was part of it was my I had a very difficult childhood, as far as biological father that left young, and created a lot of ripple effects in my identity that I didn't know how to process, and you know didn't really know how to ask for help with that. So So a big part of it was I didn't want to be the type of man that considered him to be.
Mhm.
So I was trying to just do the opposite and just
Every
be a
day.
better person. So, and it was a very vague, and it's interesting because over time you learn to find forgiveness and compassion. He was doing the best he could. He's passed on, so that kind of thing. But yeah, it was really just looking around and recognizing that we have a choice as to the type of person that we want to be. I mean, we can have personality and we can have traits and we can have genetics and all that kind of stuff, but the reality of it is you don't have to be a jerk. You don't have to. You can be nice, you can be a kind person if you choose to be. And so I just decided I wanted to be that. you know and it was funny because it was that choice that led eventually to walking into a martial arts school to learn how to be a fighter, and then seeing them teaching children and seeing the look on the kid's face and going, holy crap. Like it was something outside of me. It was seeing, that power, and these children having experience that I had in my family environment, but not through certain role models in my, family situation. So yeah, so it's just kind of an interesting thing, but it was slow and there was no real defining moment. Well, a couple, but
Yeah,
you know,
it's amazing. Our generation, and I'm including both of you in that, although you're probably at the edge of my generation. Um, we're probably the first crew in all of recorded history that ever took a minute to think about what could my way of being be. you know like we language it as I am the type of person, like, again, objectifying that it weighs this amount, is this big, and wears these kind of clothes, and as opposed to, guys were changing their names. They were saying, my name is not Todd Smith anymore. I'm going to be known as Veronicus from now on, or, Werner Erhard. I don't like this persona of being, who my parents raised. I'm going to reinvent myself, and I'm going to become this. And the whole notion, when I first, somebody mentioned to me in the early 1990s, you want to work on your way of being, Bill. I said, what are you talking about, Willis? He's, no, here's the thing, with practice, you can authentically become any human being that you want to be. You can take on board any positive characteristic that you think you would like to have, as opposed to always just reacting the way you've always reacted. And that kind of bent my mind for a little bit, because I don't think that I'd really given it much thought before that. And to hear you say, I didn't like the kind of person that I was, and I was not willing to continue being that way. How many people get to a point in their life where they say something like that and then actually do something about it? And how many people feel like they're the victim of circumstance, and this is all they got to give? That's particularly who we want to be talking to today in this particular episode. If there's anyone out there that's having that moment, and people in your family, close relations, regard you in a particular way and are unwilling to listen to your point of view any longer, they're not sure who you are, and you're sure they're not sure who you are. How do you engage that conversation going forward? As Lisa said earlier, a little bit at a time, until
And
all of a
yeah,
sudden.
yeah. And to
Yeah.
maybe change who, your family, you're not necessarily, but you don't pick your family, obviously, they say, but then there's your spiritual or, other family, like people end up getting close to, but you can change those people. And I think Ken has, I've even said it before, because I keep hearing it, all these motivational speakers is like, show me your friends and I'll show you your future.
Yes.
So, to change, look at who you want to be and then change who you surround yourself with, kind of thing. I think is one of the things. But you were right. I think that we were one of the first generations to be able to even ask that question, even though it was a question to ask. My grandmother, I think, my grandmother didn't like the way her name was spelled, so she changed that. I mean, she didn't do it legally or anything like that, but she was Madeline, spelled Madeline, but she wanted to be Madeline. But I mean, I think that's as far as she would have ever dared to change her life. There would be no other thought process to her. So then, but now 2 generations later, we are asking those questions, and God knows, her great great grandchildren are thinking well even beyond that. So thankfully.
You know what's interesting about that? I think it was Jim Rohn used to talk about you're the total of the 5 people that you have the most contact with, and I always found that kind of interesting. And over time, what's kind of captured a little bit of my curiosity is the fact that you're I don't feel you need to so much control the circle so much as the influence that circle has on you,
Mm-hmm.
and allow, like, if you stay true to your process and your values, that will kind of determine. Like, I just had a really weird, not weird, I guess, just an interesting breakthrough with a relative who I haven't been close to for decades. And we just recently had this really long conversation, and it was just, there's just been a shift in the relationship, and it was just, all I did was stayed consistent with who I am. That was not something that connected with them until they've had a situation that's come up, and all of a sudden we're vibrating on a different frequency type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a level of connection and interaction now that hadn't been there up to this point. So I never cut them off, or I
Right.
just stayed firm in who I choose to be in the process that I have, and they did the same. So we just weren't super connected, and it was uncomfortable, back to that words, at times, especially at family functions and stuff, but it was what it was, you know. So, and I wonder, like, early on, I think I was confused and thought you had to cut yourself off from certain people so that they wouldn't create that negative influence, instead of having the internal strength within yourself to allow them to be present without overly, you know, damaging who you are. And there's times where we're vulnerable, we're weak, we're fatigued, whatever. So you do have to limit those interactions because it's more than you can, like, handle, But overall, it's kind of interesting. I find myself less and less worrying about the circle around me, and more just recognizing who I'm resonating with and how that's creating value in both directions. So I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
I think it does,
Yeah.
and further to that point is to hear you say that you had a breakthrough after decades. That's a big deal. And
it was cool for both of us.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
and here's the thing. You both were walking around the world thinking that you knew everything about the other person and that there was no possibility or whatever it was. Whatever your
Actually,
internal
yeah, what's funny about that? We both 100% agree that we are two completely different people. And the only thing we have in common is the fact that we're part of the same family.
yeah.
So like, there's that acknowledgement has been there all along, you know.
Well, yeah, and did that forward the conversation? Well, not for 20 years. So the whole
Yeah.
yeah, the whole struggle is how do you and family people, because things get said and
Mhm.
things that get said that can't get unsaid, or remembered differently than whatever they remember. And so at the end of all of that going back and forth, many opportunities for conversation don't ever get life. A thought you may have about something you want to share with a loved one, and then you predict how they're going to respond to that, and then you don't risk,
Mhm.
you know? And I think that's powerful and important because I started off, kind of posing the question, are we like a river you can stick your foot in only once, but not the same river more than once? What if that's who we are? in any moment, we have the choice to do something different. And we have the choice to call somebody and ask that question. Before you ask the question, though, you might want to set up the listening just a little bit and say something like, I've had something on my mind for a while, and I want to hear your thoughts on it. And I'd like you to talk until you're done. And then when you're done, you're going to tell me you're done. And then I'm going to respond to you. And again, we're going to leave this conversation a couple of happy clams, because that's how we're going into it. And I'm really committed to generating more trust with you. And I want to get to know you in a way that I haven't known you before. And this may be an opportunity for us to build a little of that into our relationship. So whatever you say along those lines, you want to make sure that you're not setting up that usual dump that goes in two different directions, leaving both people's front yards full of cow manure and with lots of mental cleanup for days and weeks afterwards. If there's this opportunity to have a conversation that's clean, where you take a chance and you don't have to hide your emotions behind a dump truck full of manure, what would that look like? And what would that outcome be worth? And what way of being would that take? Tying all of these different thoughts that we've been talking about today. Who would you have to be to even consider the possibility of taking that risk when your gut is telling you this is like such a bad idea?
I think it's kind of like, as a martial artist, you can walk into a tense situation knowing that you may need to defend yourself, but also knowing that you may be able to de-escalate the situation, and I think it's interesting. Like, I can think of I'm sure we've all had this, a relationship that didn't, had gotten toxic or whatever, and the person says, I've changed. And, so that may be true, but you have to be very vigilant about how much of who they were is still present in who they're saying they are, because they may believe that they changed, but that may not be true. So just because, we're all in a constant state of changing doesn't mean that, there's going to be resonance ever again, so it's a tricky thing. So, and I think that's, for some of, I think it was Dan Sullivan, he said he's chosen to trust what people say up front and then verify in the back end. And he said he also knows people who will not extend trust at first. They want verification first. And it's really a choice. And either way, if you want them to convince you, you may limit opening yourself to possibly new relationships, but if you trust, then you could be taken advantage of or hurt. So which way do you want to go? Either way, you have to have both skills, the ability to listen and the ability to protect, when situations don't work out, which will happen 100% of the time. It's going to happen somewhere along the line.
Yeah, getting lost in that thought.
Because the other classic one is you changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they say that, I go, yep. Yes, I did.
Oh, yeah. In the 1970s, they gave us the ultimate takeaway. It's not you, it's me,
Yeah.
That makes everything all right. I'm screwing up your entire life and all the things that we planned and talked about. They're not going on that way, but it's not you, it's me.
Yeah.
That makes it all better.
I'm uncomfortable. It's like, you're right, I've changed and you're uncomfortable.
Yeah. And you're ugly.
We may just need to continue to go our separate ways, and it's funny with relationships too, because how often do you run into someone and you're remembering what was, either the value in it or the disconnect in it. And that creates like this natural filter for your expectation for what it could be. So it's like, you don't want to ignore that. You can't, because it informs you, but at the same time, it can't, overshadow too much what it could be in either direction, as it reinvents itself. But yeah.
Or not.
So the other
Or
really,
not, yeah.
yeah. So the corollary to that, which I discovered, I don't know, about 3 months ago, is the thought and the notion that What if people aren't remembering what happened? They're remembering an early remembrance. They're remembering the last time they remembered, which was a remembering of the previous time they remembered. And so it's kind of like along the lines of finally debunking. I guess after my cousin Vinny, we pretty much had to debunk the eyewitness testimony being the be all and the end all, and then actually, there's all these university tests and everything showing that people over time can have their entire memory changed 100% just by having other conversations where the memory is included in those conversations. So when you think about how you recall somebody or an occurrence, it's kind of fun to go and check in. My mother was she was the youngest of 7 children uh, for 9 years, and then her younger daughter or sister was born, and so then she was the next to the youngest. And so when she was 9, she had this baby to take care of, and all of the other older kids, and some had moved out of the house because there's like a 29-year difference between the oldest and that youngest sister. So when we go back to family reunions and stuff, and some of her older sisters would tell stories about what my mother was doing, and I'd go in and I'd say, hey man, my mom used to tell a story about her dad would come home from work every single day, and he'd walk into that back door and he'd kick his foot up and he'd kick the top of the door jamb. And then be another one where he always called all of his friends, called all the kids little whitey number 1, little whitey number 2, little whitey number 3, because they all had white hair until they turned 5 or 6 years old. And so I asked my aunt Eleanor, God rest her soul, she passed last January, at a family reunion about 3 years ago. And I asked her about these stories. And she looked at me wistfully and she said, Billy, your mom had the greatest memory for things that never happened of anybody I've ever seen.
Okay.
So it really almost literally is creating these perfect memories is almost like being the Stephen King of your life, right? The stories that are there in your recollection now are the ones that you've chosen to retain. They're part of your way of being. They serve you in some manner or another. And in some cases it's comfort. In other cases it might be not wanting to to forget some feeling that you had associated with a story. But I think in the meantime, what that really said to me is, aren't we all capable of that a little bit? Aren't we all capable of remembering things in a particular fashion that seem to serve us or maybe disserve us in a particular way that is worth holding on to in our own way of thinking?
Definitely. No way around it. I don't think.
Yeah.
So what would it mean if we were fallible? And the slight that we're carrying around for 20, 30, 40 years, maybe long after they're gone,
I think that, the Byron Katie questions, is it true, is the first question. Is it really true is the second question,
And then the
you're
third
have to ask yourself twice in order to oh, wait a minute, let me think about it.
And then the third question is, does it freaking matter?
Exactly. What would your life be without having that thought is basically the...
Yeah. So the whole notion of allowing things to be present and then they will disappear because what you resist persists over time. And we do that. We use human beings as sticky notes. Oh, I see you. And I remember, the last thing you said to me, you SOB. Or what a great time we had. I don't remember how we got home, or whatever, it's kind of it's our life. It's our life. And do we all have that community around us, those people that we really want, are there people in our families that we would like to choose again and maybe grow a different relationship with? I mean, a relationship, every year, we talked about this last year, that every year comes in like a baby and goes out like an old man. What if your relationship could get retired and you could get a new Mario? Press that reset button and start over. Have that conversation that basically says, we're not talking to each other, and that's not all right with me. I don't know who you are any longer. I don't know who I am where you're in regards to you. I would really be interested in exploring that, because I'm looking around and I have a lot fewer friends that are walking on the face of the earth today than I did this time last year. I'd like to have this opportunity to say something new, to say something that creates this new great feeling between the two of us.
The spiritual pain is one of the biggest regrets on deathbeds. It's like conversations you didn't have, and people that you cut out or want to bring back in, or just an argument that you don't even remember how it started, kind of thing. So I think if everybody can just take a look at somebody that you just open the door, a little bit, and see if that's possible to regain a relationship that you thought was broken, even if it's worth it. You could find out at least.
And you know what? Some are not worth it.
Right.
Sorry, guys. This is as good as it gets. And quite frankly, all you can ever know in today, in this moment right now, that next moment you're going to have, the one that you're having right now, the one that's now gone, okay? The only choice you can have is, how am I going to behave in this moment? If there's something that's incomplete for you, if there's some thought that you're having, something that's like a loose end, or it's almost like a piece of popcorn husk, that's trapped between your gum and your tooth and you can't get it out, you might want to take a little action on that and be willing to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
After all, for the most part, it's just words. And you can always say, this didn't work, and I apologize, if it was a bad experience for you too, not my intention. Whatever it is that you got to say, maybe you got to invent what you got to say on the spot. Maybe you got to be like this crazy ninja person who's just going in, and that person that you walked in as ain't coming out alive. You're going to deposit that person in place of the person that you now have chosen to become. I don't know. Does that sound crazy?
Nope.
Well, with that said, I believe this is episode 91, guys.
Awesome.
Who'd have thunk it, huh? So again, it's always a privilege and a pleasure to spend time with both of you and all of our listeners out there. We're getting used to you guys. We like you.
We'll keep them.
Yeah, we will keep them. And all of that said, every single week we say things, and those things are intended for you to have more joy and more balance in your day if you choose to do so. And I just want to leave you with one thought. If you are the architect, if you are the discoverer, if you are, what was the word that you used, Ken?
Navigator?
Navigator. If you are the, all of that stuff, you can put that avatar on and you can say, look, I'm going to do a little experimentation here. Doesn't work out, I can always go back to being, old predictable me that I was before I started this thing. But you know what? What if it works out? Whatever it is that you want to work out, what if it works out? Well, I want to leave you with one last thought. And that thought is, you got this. I know you do. You got this, okay? Anything else, Lisa?
Oh no, my only other thought was to have a conversation with somebody you've always wanted to have one with. Like I have an elderly cousin that she sends everybody cards, but I've never really sat and talked with her for a long time. So I'd like to do that. She's in well into her 90s, so
yeah,
and still with it. So like have that conversation. If you're not not brave enough to have the scary ones, have an easy one.
You need training wheels for a little while. Give yourself a shot of success.
Yeah.
Put the knife between your teeth and dive in. It's all good. I love it. Ken?
No, just building off of that, you can also have those conversations even after they've passed on. The opportunity isn't lost. Sometimes they're even more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially when you get answers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you often do. It's just interesting how that, in some way you will.
Now that's an idea for another podcast all by itself. But in the meantime, we do that with our listeners every week, don't we?
Yeah.
We have conversations with y'all, and we're talking to you in particular. Yes, you're the one. And with that said, that wraps us for this week, and thank you all. Keep finding us on any podcast platform that you like. We'll be there.
Every week.
Adios.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us each week, as well as the rest of the network, at exvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.